Right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak here. I'm sorry I'm speaking in English. I do speak in Spanish, but it's not very good, so it's better that I speak in English. So I was asked just to provide some perspectives on what's going to be happening in terms of television, given all the changes that we're seeing in terms of the way in which you can deliver television, the way in which you can consume television. And the way in which we've looked at this, so within Deloitte, my role is just to understand what is happening in the technology, media, and telecom space. But overall, our view is that when you look at the medium-term outlook for the way in which people consume television, the reality is not very much changes. Okay? So even though the underlying technology at the production level and at the consumption level changes significantly, the underlying behavior doesn't change very much. And I'll explain why that is over the next few slides. So just to explain where I am within Deloitte in terms of my role within there and then how we do our research. So within Deloitte, we are one of the big four firms, and I work in the team which is run by the global head of technology, media, and telecoms. So globally, within Deloitte, we are about 10,000 people who look at tech, media, and telecoms. And then there is a team which I run, which looks at trends within the tech, media, and telecom sector. And we do about €1 million worth of research every single year looking at how technology, media, and telecoms work together. And the majority of our research focuses on television and also the telecom sector. So during the course of my year, I meet with a lot of people. So I do about 250 presentations a year, a lot of which are around the subject or include the subject of television. And effectively, what we research is all the questions that we get asked talking to the boards of television companies, advertisers, new media companies, technology companies, and telecoms companies, mostly around Europe, and then for my colleagues in North America and Asia Pacific. And our focus with our research is to be as empirical and evidence-based as possible. And one thing I'd observe is that there are lots of hypotheses as to what the future might look like, but most of the hypotheses are just that. They are not based upon evidence. So first of all, what I wanted to do was look at the underlying reasons why people watch television and so much of it. And I think in Spain, the average consumption of television is probably about 4 hours per day. Is that correct? Around that? So across the population, you're looking at quite a significant quantity of consumption over the course of a month. Now, what I often hear when I talk to conferences is a perception that television is being challenged by lots of new forms of media. Until recently, until Facebook listed, the most common challenger that I used to hear about television was social networks. And when you look at social networks, there is a lot of time which is spent on social networks. And this is one view which was done by Comcast about a year ago on the amount of time spent on social networks around the world, across all networks, so not just Facebook, but across every single network out there. And they estimated it as about 6.7 billion hours for the month, which sounds a very big number. And also, if you can see in the writing there, what they estimate is that about 1 in 5 of every minute spent online is now on social networks. So in total, you're looking at about 35 billion hours spent online. And again, 35 billion hours sounds a very big number. I just want to show you how much time was spent on television versus social networks last year in May in the UK. Now, this is a logarithmic scale. So you'll notice on the bottom it goes 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. So what you can see here is if you aggregate, if you add up all time spent on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, you get to 180 million hours. And that compares to 6.4 billion hours spent watching television in the UK. Right, so the ratio is about 35:1. That's the amount of time spent on that. Now, normally what I do before I show this slide is I ask people, how long do you think, or how much time do you think is spent in your country on Facebook versus television? And the normal answer I get is 1:1. That is the typical answer I get, whereas the actual reality is very, very different. Now, you might think, well, that's just the UK, although the UK is one of the leading countries in terms of Facebook adoption. So it's slightly over half the population are counted as regular users. A regular user, in that terms, is once per month, which in television terms would be very, very infrequent, but in Facebook terms, that's the equivalent. Now, if you look at more recent data, this is from May this year. This is some data for some of the EU 27 countries. So by the end of today, in the EU 27 countries, there will have been 2 billion hours of television watched today. Now, if you contrast that with, for example, the amount of time spent on Facebook in Spain in May 2012, the entire month, you're looking at not quite 100 million hours. So the difference in usage is absolutely vast. Now, you might think, I don't think that's right, but this is based on measured data. Okay, so it's not people saying, I think I spend X hours on this per day. This is what's being measured in terms of their actual usage. And what people tend to do is underestimate the usage of television and overestimate the usage of whatever's new and fashionable. Now, why is it that people watch so much television? And the next three slides basically point to, so this is why we think people keep on watching television, regardless of the options thrown at them. So one of the reasons why people watch television is because it addresses needs that they have. So one of the needs that people have is to relax. That is something which is common to everyone, or I guess almost everyone in this room. At the end of the day, a hard day, you don't want to be interactive because you spend all day interacting or interacting with people or with your computer. So you can see, what is very, very strong in terms of agreement is watching TV is a way of relaxing at home. And also, what people are is social. And that never goes away. And I'm using social in the traditional sense, not in the Silicon Valley sense. And what you can see here also is television is regarded as a good way to bring the family together. And again, the need to be with other people is an innate, fundamental human requirement. Technology doesn't change it because technology is relatively new, whereas core behaviour is hundreds of thousands of years old. So it's very difficult for television to change to disrupt that. Now, if you think about all your uses of technology, so people who are using tablets, using BlackBerries, effectively what you're doing is you're using digital upgrades to previous analog tools. And also, when it comes to watching television, another thing which helps compound television's drawn our attention is people like watching television when they're with other people. So it's a social activity. And some of the data that we've seen is when you look at how much people do television watch in their stage of life, and often the assumption is young people don't watch television. But as soon as they settle down with a partner, their viewing starts going up. And if you think about when is it that men start watching women's programs like Grey's Anatomy, it's when they settle down in a relationship. That's when that happens. And in terms of watching things together, there is an immense appeal to doing things together. And so even something like video games. Last week there was a convention in the US, and tens of thousands of people gathered together to spend hours watching people playing video games. And this is a shot from that conference over there. And in terms of what next with television, so one thing which is quite clear is that the physical presence of television grows steadily over time. So if you look at television's say, 20 years ago in Spain, how big would they have been on average? How big were they 10 years ago? How big are they now? How big will they be in time? So this is an advert from Sony from the 1970s. So what they're calling Tami television, or I guess you call it television para la pancha. And now, if you look over here, this is a very new television which is from Sony, and it's an 86-inch television which is 4K. It's $28,000 at the moment, but the price will fall. So by 2015, it will be about, say, 4,000 to 5,000 euros, or even lower, because of the price decline in televisions is pretty severe. But what this means is a couple of things. One of them is that, as people buy more televisions, they justify watching television by the fact they've invested in them. And even in a downturn, people buy televisions. So in the UK, we haven't, our economy's been slack since for about 5 years or so since 2008. And every year in the UK, 8 to 10 million television sets are sold. Our population is 60 million. There are 28 million households. So every 3 years, on average, every household buys a television set. And that's despite falling disposable incomes over that time. What's happening? People are trading out of cars and buying consumer technology, whether it's television or tablets. And I expect over time, people will buy these very large televisions, and the televisions they buy will get larger and larger, and the part it plays in their lives gets bigger and bigger. But one of the influence of large television means you require more resolution. And 4K was talked about earlier, and it becomes harder and harder to deliver 4K signal over certainly a DSL connection, and it becomes even challenging over a cable connection if you've got high density. And this is a view of, so on the left-hand side, you can see the historical size of television sets sold in the UK up to 2011. So you can see, if you look at, say, the red line, 43-inch televisions, and then if you extrapolate forward to 2020, by 2020, about a third of all televisions will be 43 inches or larger. Now, houses aren't getting bigger. They're probably getting smaller. But what's happening is the space dedicated to the television set is getting larger. It's not just the primary set, but the secondary set and the tertiary set. So all of that is getting larger. So television becomes a bigger part of our lives, and I think it remains a core part of our social lives and the way in which we entertain, the way in which we relax. So it remains a quarter of our waking hours. Now, one of the topics which has been talked about a lot, and it was mentioned in the earlier session, is second screens. And I think every conversation I've had over the last year around television has included a reference to second screens, which is kind of surprising because second screens have been around probably ever since you've had laptops and Wi-Fi. Second screens have been around, in terms of something which you can use quite readily. And then also you've got smartphones which have been steadily growing in popularity and are probably about 40–50% penetration in Spain or so, but your laptop penetration will be higher. Now the thing is, we're not just second screening, we're multi-screening already. So if you think about all the devices which can have a screen, a browser, storage, connectivity, there are multiples of them. So I'd expect many of you already in the evening when you're with your family, probably in the living room, you'll be having 5 or 6 of these devices between you. And if you're watching television, you have all these potential distractions. But at the end of the day, there will always be just one alpha screen, i.e. one dominant screen which captures the majority of your attention. And so I've put cameras in there because right now these are not very connected, but in about 3 or 4 years' time, it will become hard to buy a camera, a digital camera over 100 euros, which doesn't have Wi-Fi connectivity built in, which doesn't have a touch screen. So those will become very small tablets in the same way that the iPod, the latest version of the Mini on the bottom right-hand side, is becoming a very small tablet as well. So connectivity will keep on growing. The number of devices that you have will keep on growing. And we'd expect in 15 years' time, you'll have more connected devices than you will have plug sockets or I think enchufes in your home. So that's how much connectivity you'll have in your house. So this is where we are in the UK at present. So this is all the portable devices that people own, according to a survey we did in May. The most common of those is a computer, especially if you bundle the laptop computer and the netbook computer, and they're growing in connectivity. One thing I would say, iPads, I know it's very popular to talk about them at conferences, but they are not mainstream. They're still quite niche because most people buy them as additions to existing PCs. Now, in terms of how will people use these devices with television, we expect the most common way in which people are using these devices is basically to accompany TV viewing in the way in which they've done over the last 5 years, but they're just upgrading what they're doing. So according to this, so a lot of people enjoy chatting about their programs that they're watching using messaging, email, Facebook, and Twitter. And of course, the usage of it is rises by age group, and it declines with age. So the 55 plus don't really want to use Twitter. Everyone younger than that, they will use a lot of different means to talk about what they're watching. So that's quite popular. And then in terms of actually interacting with the program, so talking to the program, the popularity is a lot lower. So this is agreement with, I can't be bothered to interact with a program, e.g. by voting. So the majority across all age groups don't want to interact with the program, but they have to talk about the program. So if you think about that, so in terms of people using their second screens, so what they're looking to do is for the second screen to accompany their viewing, in the same way that having someone next to them to talk about what they're watching accompanies their viewing. So it's a continuation of that behavior, not necessarily a change to it. A new device, but an old-fashioned behavior. Sorry. And in terms of what are the distractions that people have, the most common distraction that people have when watching television remains talking to other people in the room. That is the most common distraction. And I expect that was the case 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So when you think about, is television being challenged by second screens? It's not really the case, I don't think. And some of the studies that we've seen where they've actually tried to measure the impact of second screens, it's on balance neutral. So in some cases, you get people who get probably distracted because they're playing games, they're not watching the television. In some cases, the second screen apps encourage them to watch more television rather than less. One other topic which has been talked about a lot, and I guess is the basis for this day today, is looking at the growth of connected televisions. And I just ask, what do you think in Spain is the current base of connected televisions? So not just connected televisions which have the connectivity available because they're smart TVs, but televisions which are connected to a device which allows them to connect, like an Xbox. What's your view of the current connectivity rate? Or can I ask that in Spanish? So, no, actually I can't. Okay, any views on that? 5%, 10%, anything higher? Yep? 20, right. Okay, let me give you a view as to, sorry, let me go to here. This is what we think is happening in the UK. So we think about 70% of households in the UK can already do connected television. So what they can do today is they can access video on demand. So they can access, so in the UK, it's like the BBC's iPlayer, or our commercial channels like ITV, they can access that. That is the actual current penetration in terms of the base of households which can access connected TV. Now, the reason why they can do that isn't because they have a connected TV set, because even, say, a smart TV is often sold without the full connectivity. You have to buy another dongle in order to be able to access it. But what a lot of households have, so in the UK, 43% of, there's someone disagreeing in the front.
Well, smart TVs are connectable directly.
They are connectable, but they're not necessarily connected. So a lot of the smart TV base sold in 2011 requires the purchase of an additional dongle to connect the television. you can talk to the manufacturers, and they'll tell you what they're selling. So this year, the connectivity comes built in. Blu-ray players also have connectivity built in. Sometimes you require a dongle to do that. Games consoles, so if you have an Xbox or a Nintendo Wii or a PS3, that has connectivity built in. And often, these consoles are attached to a television. So you have connected TV. Now, in the UK, about 43% of homes have a games console, which has connectivity built in. So you can see already there's a big portion of households which have that connectivity available. In terms of tablet computers, you can link them to televisions to do that. But the most common, easiest way of connecting a television set is via a PC. And in the UK, the penetration in terms of any form of computer or PC is about 90%. And if you allow for broadband households, it's about 80%. So allowing for the fact that some of those households won't necessarily have good enough connectivity, we take it down to 70%. But the quickest, easiest way of connecting a television is you buy an HDMI cable and you connect that to a television set and to a PC. And the cost of that cable in the UK on Amazon, and you have Amazon España, so I guess a similar price, is £1.13. So it's about €1.50. Now, a lot of people don't actually realize that they have connected TV. And the actual usage of it is more like that 5%, once per week. And the reason why it's so low is because terrestrial television, satellite TV, and cable TV delivers the majority of content that people want. So very few people actually want to use the connected TV to access additional content because they're already well served. Now, I'd expect over the next 5 to 10 years, the base of televisions in European households will gradually be swapped out for televisions which have two-way connectivity. And I'd expect the usage of that connectivity will remain modest over that period, unless there is an absolute disaster in terms of the broadcasters not buying any content. So long as they buy the content, they will retain the majority of the access to those customers. And when you look at lots of ways in which television, all the technology has been rolled out and implemented, there is actually very little impact on television consumption. So let me just show you a couple of slides here. So 10 years ago in the UK, broadband penetration was 17%, actually a bit lower than that, about 10% in 2002. And it's now 78%. Over that period, viewing has risen. So there's no correlation, a negative correlation between broadband penetration and TV viewing. This is PVR penetration, so this is hard disk drive recorders. I don't know what they're called in Spanish. But what you can see on the left there is, so we've gone from a base of about 2% to 50%. And over that time, viewing has gone up. So you can have the introduction of technologies which are meant to reduce TV viewing, and they actually increase. Now, one thing around video on demand, which we're experiencing right now in the UK, is so all the time, the quality of broadband goes up by about 30% in terms of speed per year. But the demand on it is going up as well. And what we've seen a lot over the last year is a growth in online video viewing. Now, does that suggest disruption to TV? It would suggest it if what was actually happening was people were watching television within online video. But that's not happening. So what's happening in terms of what people are watching on online video is a lot of it is adult content. So we'd expect in the most societies where there's no censorship, when you look at the share of hours, you've got quite a large share from adult. Google Sites is a blend of YouTube and other sites. And then TV, the BBC is the one which registers close to 1%, and the others are smaller than that. So we have about, let's say, 20 million hours of TV watched on demand at a 6.4 billion per month. So that's where we are right now. I'd expect in Spain you're at a similar quantity, unless you start including piracy there. And in terms of behaviors, so this is what people do. This is what we've been tracking over the last 3 years when people are watching, if they've got PVRs and on demand. So people with PVRs, so they've recorded content to watch later, they've selected it, and they still go, first of all, they default to broadcast television. And after that, they check what's on their PVR, and then they look at what's on on-demand websites. And when you look at some of the OTT players, so the over-top players like Netflix, which was referred to earlier, there's a lot of awareness of them, but the actual usage of those sites is quite low. And the actual payment for those sites is even lower. So that's what we're seeing right now in terms of awareness and usage of OTT. If you look at the future of OTT pure plays, I think it's very, very difficult for an OTT pure play to succeed because of the cost of content. So I think it's the companies which have the television ecosystems which will do well from OTT. So companies which offer OTT as part of their offering will do better in the long term than the pure plays. There are some content companies today which are providing the OTT pure plays, and they're asking for payment in cash in advance. That is not a good sign. Right, and in terms of brands, I think channel brands really, really matter. So this is one example of brand extension. You know, it's Jamie Oliver, a cook who does a TV program, and it seems everything else. And this here is a way of illustrating the power of brands in the UK TV market. So on the top, what you've got is people who watch BBC One most, or BBC Two most, ITV One most, Channel 4 most, Channel 5 most, or E4 most in the UK. And what you have down below is the most common usages in terms of online player sites. So basically, what it comes down to is if people watch a lot of the BBC on broadcast, they watch a lot of it, or they watch most of it online. So the branding aligns. It's not a question of, you have one brand for broadcast, one brand for on demand. So that was the last slide that I wanted to show in terms of television. So there will be fantastic change in terms of television, in terms of the devices that are used to watch television, the quality of them, the range of them, and also the payment models. There will be a massive improvement in the production quality of television. So if you look at, say, the Olympic Games that were just filmed now, and you think how many cameras were involved in that, and I expect there will be about 3 times as many cameras involved in the next games. And if Madrid gets it for, is it 2018, then I expect there will be an even greater number of cameras involved at that time. But the way in which television is watched remains largely the same. So I'm happy to take any questions. There's a question at the back. There.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Gabriel Solsona. I work for the public Spanish television. I just wanted to know if you have figured the penetration of the hi-fi systems attached to the televisions to enjoy multi-channel 5.1 sound surround systems.
I don't expect it's very high. I think the quality of the sound for televisions is probably going down because the televisions are becoming thinner, and so the speakers become poorer. So people will buy 5.1 systems, but they won't use them because of the wiring that they have to do to put all the wiring around the room. So I expect there's lots of satellite speakers which are still in their boxes.
But do you have the figures?
I don't have the figures. I can find them out, but I expect the number is not very high. So I would be surprised if it was more than 5% of households have 5.1 sound. So where you'll have 5.1 sound will be with enthusiasts and with people who have home cinemas. But the common household won't have 5.1 sound. And I think the quality of the sound at the moment is declining, but it will improve over the next 5 years as you get improvements in audio technology going into thin television sets.
Thank you.
One question, how do you see the evolution of television in 10 years? Do you think that the video on demand will be over online, over live content, or live content will remain the percentages it is now? Will it vary a lot?
In terms of distribution, there will be more and more ways in which you can do distribution of content. In some cases, it will be the cheapest way to deliver it over fiber if you can do fiber. But then over the next 10 years, if you look at the cost of deploying fiber in Europe, and you look at the state of the economies in Europe, I don't think it's going to happen because you've got 10 years of slow growth if you have growth at all. But even if you look at, say, countries where there is, say, a lot of fiber, so the thing is, a lot of the delivery of it is still, the consumption is still live. And then in terms of how it's delivered, if it's mandated that you deliver over a line like in Korea, then that happens. Otherwise, it doesn't. So a lot of it will depend on how much fiber can be deployed in that time. And I know a lot of politicians, say in the UK, are making big promises as to running out of broadband, but there literally aren't the funds available to deliver it. And then when you look at how much people are prepared to pay, the case doesn't stack up. So in the UK, in Spain, the cost of broadband is quite high. In the UK, a lot of people pay nothing for broadband because it's bundled in with other services. And currently, one player makes money from broadband. That's it. What's the basic business case for rolling out fiber to the home? And right now, there isn't one.
Hi, this is Nico Muñoz from Abbas Media. I mainly agree with all your statements, but I want to just to highlight that 10 years ago or 20 years ago, people was reading the newspaper while watching TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
While today you are presenting us a plethora of devices that drag attention. No? Mm-hmm. What do you think about what's coming in the change of attitudes of the coming generations when they are in front of TV?
Yeah. No, I mean, that is a key question, is what happens when people grow up in terms of their behaviors. But if you think about, say, 10 years ago we were reading newspapers while watching TV, I think people still do read newspapers. It's just that they read them online and they don't pay for them. So, the newspaper situation is quite different to the TV situation. I expect we will have more and more devices over time. I don't think that ever goes away, so we never end up with one device. And each of those devices can distract. But then television can distract too. So, the attention that we give most to in terms of devices is whichever device is most interesting to us at a particular point in time. And so, if you look at, say, the iPad, and it's the iPad as opposed to Android tablets, there are lots of games which are sold via that, people taking their iPads to watch television. Now, is it the case that people will play games rather than watch television? I think it's the case, occasionally that will happen, but not as a mainstream behavior. Because when you look at how many hours do people actually play, it's not that high on average. So when people get console games, they will have like a few days, often at most a week, when all they do is they play that game and they stop. And then it might be another few months before they start again. Whereas with television, it's several hours of consumption every single day. So long as television has lots of variety and good quality, and quality is subjective, then I expect it retains attention. So in 10 years' time, I would expect it still to be the case that television remains a major distraction for people. Now, 10 years ago in the UK, if I'd said that, I would have been laughed at. At the moment now, the view is television has proved resilience despite everything thrown at it in the last 10 years. And last night in London, we had an event at our offices, and we had the head of strategy for Sky, and we had the head of the CEO of BBC Vision, which does all the television. And he was saying, both of them were saying, 10 years ago, they didn't expect TV to be where it is today. They thought it would all be on demand, all be online. So they got it wrong.
I liked a lot the last part where you were talking of brands. One challenge I'm facing is that today television is mainly conceived of linear channels. It's a linear proposition. And I'm struggling myself in wondering why we still need a channel. So, because the content itself, well, there is an historical and technical reason, I'm not arguing on that, but going forward with the storage capabilities on board of televisions, with the over-the-top distribution, the digital usage of the transponder, so cable, satellite, etc., why I should have a linear channel? I can have all the content on my television, and then someone will propose me the content I most like. And your slide with the VOD catch-up essentially bounded to exactly that one perfectly shows that. So my question is, if you have done, or if you have any analysis on the evolution of the proposition on television on one side, and also if you have any hint on which could be the reason to keep linear channels. In the end, is quite an inefficient way of bandwidth usage. You can deliver exactly the same content in 10 times better ways to the end user, so keeping the brand and keeping all the other values, but using the bandwidth in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways in which you can use the bandwidth. I'd agree with that. But in terms of, why should you retain a brand or a channel brand? It's simply because, people become generally very attached to different brands. And it's a very quick way for them to select what they want to watch. So rather than, people don't want to select programs, they'd rather select the channels and trust in the schedulers of those channels to choose content which they want to watch.
That does not require a linear channel. That's exactly my point. So branding, editorial, and content aggregation are the value. Is there a value in a linear, predefined proposition? That you see the difference between a channel and what you are saying is not a channel in the strict sense, is the brand, BBC One. So I see the value of that. I'm wondering the value itself of the channel. And this is very important because we are talking of over-the-top and innovative ways and going forward of television. So that's why I'm asking it. So there could be ways to aggregate and propose the content associated to a brand that is not anymore just linear. So a play out of content on a certain frequency, right? But there could be new innovative ways, and all the application stack can help in that direction.
So are you saying linear as opposed to as in live?
Live means asynchronous. So is different from live between synchronous. Is if you think a channel, BBC One or whatever, is a set of stuff that comes one after the other. I cannot go back in time 20 minutes. That is a catch-up. But I can do exactly the same experience without using the bandwidth. I can have the content on my storage, and I can just have a playlist. That is achieving the same result of powering on, going on BBC and watching it. And this is something that can be done interactively. And I can tailor that channel based on my profile.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to tailoring, say, channels, so what people enjoy a lot is watching at the same time as other people. I don't know that goes away. So, there are lots of vast repositories of BBC One content available, and we have reverse EPGs and even forward EPGs now, which you can do via connected TV. But the demand for it remains very, very low. So if you think, iPlayer has been around for 5 years, and it's currently running at 2 views per person per month. So that's where we are. And you can have iPlayer to your TV, to a Nintendo Wii, to an Xbox, to a PS3, to a tablet. You name it. All the options are there. Yet the demand is to watch the linear content. So when it comes to say like Saturday TV, the appeal is watching at the same time as other people. And when you have things like Twitter, then if you want to enjoy Twitter, you've got to be watching live. Otherwise, the tweets don't make sense. So social networks are enhancing the value of live and simultaneous consumption. And the thing is, you have this hypocrisy, not hypocrisy, say this contradiction in people's behavior, and that they go, I want to be an individual, and they express their individuality by following what everyone else does. And I don't think that ever goes away.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's a pleasure to have you here today. I am afraid we don't have more time for questions. So